Now let's welcome our main speaker for tonight, Dennis.
Need a drink first. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dennis, and I'm an alcoholic. And I want to thank Ramona for asking me to come and share. It's always a privilege and an honor to share at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Congratulations to the Chip people, and happy birthday to Lisa. Did it get Lisa and Sharon? I want to quote the big book, if I may, for a minute here, because it has a lot to do with everything I'm about to say, actually. On page 55, it says, actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in the heart of every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but it is there in all of us. In the next paragraph, it says, we found the great reality, capital G, capital R, deep down inside. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. The other thing I would like to quote from the big book, sort of loosely, is lack of power. That was my dilemma. I had to find a power greater than myself that could solve my problem. And that's what this book is about. That's what its main aim is. Well, I just want you to know that if that was going to be how I was going to have to get sober, I couldn't be here. So you'll see what I mean by that as we go along. But the significant thing, and the first thing that I quoted, is that if God, as I understand God, is in me, and I am drinking myself to numbness every day, then I am drinking numb the only source and hope I have of healing and recovery. And I didn't know that, and I couldn't know that for a long time. So I come from an alcoholic family. My father and my uncle died of this disease. I also come from an insane family. My sister was schizophrenic. She ended up killing herself. There was a lot of physical violence and a lot of sexual molestation that went on in my childhood. And while I understand perfectly that that did not cause my drinking, it made me very happy to drink so I could get numb and not notice how I felt about a lot of it. I escaped into the military, and I thought, wow, you know, this will be wonderful. I will get out of the totalitarian, authoritarian, awful home life that I'm being brought up in, and I'll go to the military. So, you know, I just got more of the same. Except that unlike home, you know, the military said, yeah, have a drink. Have a bunch of drinks. And have them cheap. I mean, when I was stationed in Japan, a fifth of Gilby's gin was 90 cents, you know? So, you know what I'm talking about? I drank some gin. But the main point that I want to make here is that I wanted a drink to get out, you know, and I drank for 22 years. When I got out of the military, I was bitter and resentful at them because they treated me like they treated me instead of like how I wanted them to. And so I got a job in a factory, and I got a wife, and I got a case of beer, and I had arrived. You know, I was 21 years old, and I was a happening guy. And I drank, and pretty soon, of course, her mother died of alcoholism, so she was not neutral about my drinking. And so she started talking about it, so I realized that I had picked the wrong woman. So I fired her, and you know, I was single for a minute, and I started going to college, and then I met another woman, and pretty soon I had another wife. And you know, we talk about drinking and using here, okay? Now, I used a little bit of drugs. Mainly, I smoked a whole elephant full of dope, okay? But my main drug of choice was alcohol. And I used people, you know. I used these women who were with me and who were kind to me mostly. And so that second wife, after about 3 years, she started that same rumble, I think you drink a little too much. I think you may have a problem with alcohol, And I said, oh, man, I picked another bad one. And so, she just didn't understand me, So, that marriage came to an end. And as I was leaving that one, I was moving into the house with the next one, and as soon as the divorce from the second one was final, I got married to the third one, okay? And I stayed with this woman for 5 years, and she was a most excellent woman. And that was a long time ago, and I think of her still with a lot of love. And she put up with a lot from me because I couldn't stand to be loved, and the more kindly and loving she was toward me, the more abusive I was towards her. I drank every day, and a lot of the time I drank on her dime. And she, too, finally said to me one day, I'm going to leave if you don't deal with your drinking. And that scared me, So I had an interesting experience here because by this time I had some education. I'm a pretty smart guy. And I was also a rabid atheist, and I wasn't just sitting in the back row being an atheist. I was in the front, and I was ready to take your head off if you weren't an atheist, In fact, I used to enjoy getting into arguments with Seventh-day Adventists on the front porch to see if I could shake their faith or at least hurt their feelings, to shame them in some way for having a power greater than themselves, because that's weak, It's weak. It's for cowards, I didn't need that stuff. So here I am, and this woman's going to leave me, and I really cared about her, so I went downtown Long Beach to the Long Beach office of Alcoholics Anonymous, and there they gave me my first big book, and I listened to this lady tell me about losing everything, her house, her kids, husband's in jail, and she's waiting for the liquor store to deliver the gallons of vodka, and I go, wow, that's not happening with me. I'm living indoors, My wife's paying the rent, I'm not like you guys, And so that's going on, and then all of a sudden these guys file into the room, It's like 3-4 guys, sober guys from AA. And she says, oh, here, talk to this guy, and he's new and probably scared, and I said, I'm not scared. And, so they gathered around me, as we do, and they started talking nicely to me and reaching out to me and handing me phone numbers. And, I was scared to death and angry as hell. And before I knew it, this one guy says, well, let's just hold hands and say the Lord's Prayer. Now, mind you, I'm a rabid atheist, so I don't say no prayers, you know what I'm saying? I don't know nothing about spirituality. I don't have nothing to do with meditation, and I definitely do not want to say any prayers, especially the Lord's Prayer. So here I am, and I'm holding hands with these guys in the Long Beach AA office, and I'm saying the Lord's Prayer, and I'm thinking, damn, I wish I had a baseball bat so I could start bouncing it off some heads. But then I noticed that there's this other thing going on with me, and that's that I am sobbing my guts out. And I was a little confused about that. I didn't know what that message just was about at that point, The outcome of it was that I didn't have a drink for 8 months, and I became a different person for a minute. I didn't go to meetings or say I'm an alcoholic or anything like that. But when graduation day came from college, my wife had a party for me. And I remember walking into the kitchen and opening the door, and there were the half-quart cans of Budweiser, And it was just like it says in the book, no thought at all, I just reached down and grabbed one and popped open the top, and just then my wife walks into the room, and she says, what are you doing? And I said, it's okay, I got it under control now. I'm fine, I haven't had a drink in 8 months, And, that was the beginning of the end, because I went right back to where I was, and I, drank heavily and drank my way right out of that marriage and stole a couple $1,000 from her on the way out. And I got down to that point, like Mike was talking about, where she said to me, me or Budweiser? Love, generosity, compassion, gentleness, understanding, or Budweiser? I'll have another Budweiser. That's what I chose, and I was gone. And I lost that most excellent, wonderful woman. So I had a solution for that one, though. I got another one. You counting with me now? That's 4. I'm on wife number 4 here. And, she's a sick drug addict, gets up in the morning and does lines and smokes marijuana in the morning. And I'm not drinking yet until 10 and 11 o'clock, So, 12 and 12 says self-righteousness can be enjoyable too, And I was milking the hell out of that because I was, hey, I'm worried about you. You got a problem. You got to deal with this stuff. You're out of control. I was barely holding on to a job and drinking myself into a stupor every day. So that one lasted a whole 11 months. And but something happened there. There was a juncture where I thought, let's go to marriage counseling. We just need to go to marriage counseling. That's the problem. We just need to go to marriage counseling. So that never happened, although we almost got there. We got the Tiny Nailers on Lincoln and Mindanao, was it? That restaurant used to be there, and we were to meet there and then go to this therapist's office, and we both got good and drunk beforehand and ended up having a stand-up screaming match in Tiny Nailers. She went home, and I went to see the marriage counselor. And I said, this is going to be divorce counseling. And I think I might drink a little bit. So this woman didn't know anything about substance abuse, so she just said, well, why don't you just agree that you won't drink until next week, until I see you again next week. And I was pretty pickled at the time, so I said, okay, I can hang with that, So doing that every week, renewing that agreement, again, I had a couple of months where I didn't drink, But then, cunning, baffling, and powerful, here it comes from the blind side. I start having fun. I start feeling good. I'm out dancing. Somebody walks by with a tray of silver bullets with the sweat running down the can, and I got to have one. And bang, I was out again for 4 more years, just as fast as that. Now, at no time are you hearing me going to church during any of this, praying, meditating, seeking humility, or any of that other stuff that we do around here. In fact, I was going the opposite direction. When I say I was a rabid atheist, I was angry. And at the same time, as it got worse for me, as I got closer to the early stages of alcohol poisoning, there would be times when I would awaken or come to shaking, just trembling, okay? And I would start praying to a God that I absolutely did not believe in because I'm a rabid atheist, that if I didn't die right now from this, that I would quit drinking and I'd turn it around and I'd never do this again. That would be like 8 o'clock in the morning. Of course, by 11 o'clock, I started feeling a little better. And by 2 o'clock, I thought, I probably overreacted a little bit. And I opened another beer, because I just overreacted, And so it went until the wheels fell off. And I had a moment of clarity. I'd been drunk for 4 days, and I was puking my guts out, and I was realizing that I couldn't drink it down, and I couldn't get it up, and I couldn't get drunk, and I couldn't get sober. And I was still seeing a therapist, and so I went to her, and this time she knew something about it. But this time I did something different. I said, I cannot stop drinking. I am an alcoholic, Every time I leave these sessions, I'm drunk before I get home. I cannot stop, and I am terrified, and I was terrified. That was step one. Now, mind you, I didn't rush right to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting because you guys, are going to make me be a Lutheran, and I'm not having any of that. I did that already, and I got my ass kicked, and no offense, please, no offense to anybody who follows that path. I totally support you. I'll drive you there, okay? But that's just not mine, and it wasn't mine. And I knew that you guys were going to make me pray to the Christian God and become a Lutheran, and so there was no way I would even think about coming here, So for a while, I just didn't drink, and I went to work, and things got better on the outside as they can and do when you're not destroying your body and your life. And I had a new Sportster in the garage, and people liked me a lot better when I wasn't drinking, and people would say, like if I was at work, they'd say, well, why don't you go to lunch with us, I'd say, oh, man, should have asked me 10 minutes ago. I already made plans for that time, My plan was always that I was terrified to death of you. I was totally uncomfortable in my own skin. I had to get away from you. It was all I could do to stand to go to work. And when I was done with work and it was, oh, let's go to a movie, let's go to dinner, oh, man, I already made plans for that time. And it was the same routine. I went home and I took the movies that I just watched 2 weeks ago and plugged them in the VCR and watched them again. And what was happening to me that I could not have said to you at that time was that the last part of the disease was taking me down. And it's that part that's called spiritual malady. Okay? And so everything was fine on the outside, and I was descending on the inside. And I couldn't understand it. I'm going to therapy 4 hours a week. I got a brand new Harley in the garage. People like me, and I'm miserable, and I'm just not wanting to be on the planet anymore. And so what I did with that is that I finally sat down with a .44 Magnum, and it was loaded, and I pulled the hammer back, and I put it to my head. And that was my moment of truth. And I did not obviously pull the trigger. I scared the hell out of me. I put the gun down. I picked up the phone. I called my therapist. And I told her what happened. She said, come over here. And on the way over there, I'm just saying to myself, I'm terrified by this. I don't ever want to be here again. I am willing to do absolutely anything at all, anything, to not be in this terrible, painful, despairing place again, except go to Alcoholics Anonymous. You guys are going to make me be a Lutheran, and I'm not. I won't. And I know that. I know that's what you're going to make me be, because I know all there is to know about AA at that time, see? I think that's called contempt prior to investigation, but I didn't know that at the time. So she had a different story for me this time. She said, you need to see the safety net that's always been there for you. You need to see that all these consequences that have happened around your life maybe aren't consequences, that maybe there's something larger at work. You need a support group. You need to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. And somehow I made it to an AA meeting, and I met this guy, and the first thing he said was, well, tell me a little bit about yourself, as we do here, and the first words out of my mouth were, oh, I got a problem with the God thing, and I was so uptight, man, and I was so stiff, and I was just so ready to have to say rosaries or do something I didn't want to do that was totally wrong, and he said something amazing to me. He said something that opened the door for me to be here. He said, oh, I know what you mean. I've struggled a lot with that too. A lot of us do struggle with that here. But here, let me show you this italicized line in the big book. And it said, God as I understand him. Wow. I don't have to be a Lutheran. And what I realized, and again, I apologize, if anybody's a Lutheran here, I do not mean to cast any aspersion. I just had a bad experience with it. I thought, wow, maybe I can be here, you know. And I wish I had that 44 Magnum. I wish I had it cast in resin, because it was the keys to the kingdom for me. It was the key of willingness. I thought it was a weapon of destruction, and in fact, it was the key of willingness. Because it finally got me here, and I figured out, wow, maybe I can be here, you know. And so I came here, and I stayed here, and I got an amazing sponsor, Slave and Dead. And all of the meat and potatoes and all that is good about Alcoholics Anonymous, I got from him, David. You know? And he took me through the steps as they're outlined in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And you know what? I got so much goddamn education, it is killing me. And he wouldn't listen to my yada yada an analysis of the program. But he said, he taught me what spirituality is. And it was totally not about, you know, ritual and reading the Bible or any of that stuff that didn't have any meaning for me. He said, come over here and help me wash the ashtrays. Thank you. You know? He taught me that the spiritual life is not a theory, I have to live it. And it isn't about something I do in a building that's identified as a church building. It's what I do in my affairs every day with you and everybody I encounter. You know? So I worked the steps, you know, and I'm so thankful that I got right into them. And I worked the steps, and I got some time, and I started to sponsor people myself, and I started speaking at meetings, and then I became a hell of a guy. You know, I went from rabid atheist to spiritual giant. And then, as Mike so already told us, you know, what happened was that one more time, the old cunning, baffling, and powerful did a tap dance on my head, and I said to myself, you know, I'm such a spiritual giant here now, it's time for me to get some stuff. And I mean stuff you can ride and wear that's expensive and, you know, some property prestige money shit, you know. And I didn't think, well, maybe I'll get an extra job and work for it. Because as the 12 and 12 points out very clearly, we are alarmed at the prospect of work. I love that line. So what I did was I decided that I would win the California lottery. If you listen to that line, you can really get a real strong feel for why the end of the second step says restored us to sanity. Because I decided I was going to win the California lottery. Now, mind you, I did spend an embarrassing amount of money trying to do that. And you know, I prayed some of the most fervent prayer ever. And every week before, the night before the draw, I was, oh, please, God, I'm bargaining, and I'm going to share it, and I'm going to give it to charity, you know, and I'm going to help friends of mine who are in trouble, my family. And then, when I didn't win, it was, fuck you, I hate you, go to hell. There is no God. Spiritual giant. And what happened is that, you know, I got the wonderful gift that always happens when you allow the spiritual malady to take you over if it doesn't kill you, and that is that I was driven to my knees one more time. And I said the prayer you guys taught me. I said, God, please help me. I'm in trouble. Period. I have to put the period because otherwise I want to give direction. And I began to really know what it means when we say we stop fighting everything and everybody, you know? And I've been around for quite a while now. I'll be sober 23 years next month. And the thing that I have learned and keep learning more deeply all along is that thy will be done for me is the cornerstone of my faith and of getting to stay sober one day at a time. And thy will be done means thy will be done, not thy will be done if I like the outcome, if I like the consequences, if it's okay with me, or if I'm going to get laid. Okay? It means I'm really going to have faith in something unseen that I can't point at, that I can't prove, and that thing and its way is better than anything that's going to get concocted in this small area. You know? And I've gotten to prove that to myself over and over again in the years that I've been sober, you know. And I, about 10 years ago, I started having some health issues. And that's been a real challenge to me, you know, because when you have angina and hypertension and, you know, stuff like that, it's scary, you know. And I notice throughout my evolution in spirituality in this program and in sobriety is that when I get scared, that's when I'm ready to scram, take control again. Okay, I can handle this better than God. Okay, and I'm going to run this now. So step back and let me run it. You know. And of course, that scares the hell out of me even more because, you know, it's like deciding to win the lottery. I can't decide to not have angina. What I can do is go to the doctor and follow direction, you know. And I had an amazing experience 4 years ago. A friend of mine in the program who I've known for many years and who's from time to time sought my help came to me, and she's like about 32, 33 years old, and she's dealt with cancer multiple times, and she's had multiple surgeries, and she came to me, and she was in tears, and she was frantic, and she said, "Dennis, I think my cancer's coming back, and I'm too young to die, and I don't want to die, and I'm scared. What do I do, you know?" And I just like, whoa, man, how do I answer this, you know? And thankfully, I've learned so much from Dave and from people like him who really walk the talk in here, you know, that the answer that came to me was, you know, a long time ago, you and I made a decision to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand Him. That's been the best decision we've ever made. I see no reason to not make it again now. And to bow and get on our knees one more time and say, okay, this scares me, I don't like it, thy will be done. 1 month later, I got diagnosed with prostate cancer. And that was really scary, you know, because, I mean, I'm a bargainer, you know, I bargain with God all the time, you know, and I had this bargain, and I didn't really realize it until I got diagnosed, that I'd had this bargain going on with God for decades that I'm not going to get cancer. Okay, something else, way, way down the line, like when I'm 130, but not cancer, you know. And so there I was, you know, and I had cancer, you know. And my first thought when the doctor said, you got fairly aggressive prostate cancer and you need to do something about it right now, my first thought was 2 gallons of Gilby's gin. Because I'm an alcoholic. And I will always be an alcoholic. And I want to put something in my mouth to make it go away immediately. Okay? My second thought was, gun to the head. Okay? But those thoughts were only thoughts. And I have learned to disregard a lot of my thoughts. Instead, I sat there and said, tell me what to do. She gave me some options. I chose surgery. I had surgery a month later. And, you know, it's now 4 years later. And I'm still cancer-free. And you know what? I learned in that experience that I'm going to die. It is not an abstraction. And I may die a lot sooner than my plan. 130, hey, wait a minute. It might be a lot sooner, you know. But I still keep coming back to the same thing. If I want to keep this precious gift of sobriety, I have to keep on giving it up. I have to keep on saying, thy will be done, and then mean it. It's like I work with my friend Mike here, you know, and the first thing that I said to him is, the most important thing that I can tell you as we embark on this passage through the Big Book is the spirit in which you do this is everything. I have to open myself up to 12 steps and let them do their mojo on me. But I have been rocketed into the fourth dimension. And along the way, what I had to find out is that the fourth dimension is not being helicoptered to the CEO's office of Disney World. I get to stay sober today. I don't have to take a drink today. I get to be of service to somebody else. And I went back to school and graduated, and I got a doctorate in psychology, and I help people for a living, And I barely made it through high school. So I get to have the miracles, and I used to hate it that I was an alcoholic, that my calling is to do this work, And then I finally understood, you know what? As a kid, I wanted to play the trumpet and be Elvis Presley, And that is not God's plan for me. It's right here. It's right now. And it's in my efforts every day to pass on this wonderful gift to as many people as I can and share it with them, and be in the miracle of it, So I started out by quoting the big book, I drank and numbed out the voice of my higher power, and so I could not hear it. And the gift of dignity and grace has been given to me, and like the doctor's opinion says, and I'll close with this, I love that line, I came here to scoff and I stayed to pray. Thank you.